to introduce our next session. So please get your questions coming through, and we are making a note of them, and we have the opportunities to discuss further in detail in our panel time. But next I'd like to introduce the session of the role of childcare and family supports for an inclusive employer. And I'm really delighted to introduce firstly Jennifer Liston-Smith, who's head of thought leadership. For over 20 years, Jennifer has been relentless in the pursuit of innovation, identifying and defining, sharing best practice and next practice for leading global employers in flexible working, family-friendly and well-being programs. So very, very pertinent in today's workplace, closing the gender pay gap and promoting gender inclusive parenting. She's also a sought-after speaker, writer, conference and moderator, and a consultancy on these projects. Jennifer also set up and for a decade led the coaching and consultancy side of what became Bright Horizons Work and Family Solutions, advising employees in banking, professional services, STEM, and wider sectors on programs for working parents, carers, and evaluating the impact and return on investment, as well as developing coaches and coaching capability. She now focuses on identifying overarching trends through research and through advising employers and translating these insights into solutions and practical actions. Also delighted to share, introduce Paul Courtley, who also works at Bright Horizons. Paul's role is to enable, assist and help employers understand how to support childcare and improve business performance in relation to flexible working and inclusive work practices. So working together at Bright Horizons, I've just been looking on your website and your social media profiles. I'm really interested to learn more about the work that you do. Really exciting stuff and something pertinent to me. My wife has just had a baby as well, who's 7 months old, and you know, so I'll be listening with interest. So over to you, Paul and Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Ricky, for that lovely warm introduction, and it's an absolute pleasure to be with you all here this morning. And what a humbling experience hearing the presentations so far and the data and evidence that lies behind the journey that needs very much to be made and to continue. So absolutely honoured to be part of this discussion. And we'll be looking at a slightly different aspect of inclusion together with you, and you know, obviously it's part of the intersectionality and the layering that we've discussed, but we're talking about the inclusion of working parents and working carers within the workforce, and the role of childcare as an aspect of being an inclusive employer. And you know, we know that in recent times the role of the employer has expanded and moved into home life. For a lot of people, I mean, obviously frontline workers were very much in their frontline roles, but many people went into hybrid or in fact fully remote roles during the lockdown. And that meant that a lot of life went on camera. So family life became visible in a way that we can't now unsee, which has actually been quite helpful in opening up conversations. And we know that NHS and healthcare employers, as employers of both frontline workers and now going forward hybrid working staff, are definitely looking at how they can step into that space and, you know, remove some of the barriers that have always existed for working families, but have become much more prominent and perhaps in some ways harder to navigate in the new working world that we're entering into in this next phase. So Ricky has introduced Paul and myself, and he warmly introduced Bright Horizons at the beginning of this session. So we provide, as you can see on the slide here, a combination of very practical solutions, from backup care, so care when other solutions aren't available on a given day, workplace nurseries, and increasingly nurseries near sites to workplaces, and then online solutions such as the parental leave toolkit, the work and family space, which are very much sort of content and resources and advice for parents and carers in the workplace. We also provide coaching and network events and so on, so very much in-person services also. So as we started touching upon, the role of employers in family life has expanded. We've had a lot of big government in the last 18 months, you know, rightly so. We needed the Chancellor to wave through new measures and supports. And in the same way, we've had what we could call big employer. We've had employer involvement in well-being, in mental health, in racial injustice, and in family life in ways in which we have not previously seen, and perhaps more direct conversations, as our previous speakers have been also very much pointing towards, you know, the need for those more upfront conversations. But I guess many of us have experienced that that has happened too, that something has shifted. It takes a pandemic sometimes for people to address things more openly, directly, honestly. And we've seen that, and we've seen that shift, so that the need to regard childcare as part of the infrastructure, of part of what makes work work, has been much more of a dialogue for many of us. And certainly we work, as Ricky had mentioned at the beginning, we work with about 1,300 employers across the world. We work with about 400 in the UK. And those are employers across all sorts of different sectors, including the NHS and many, many different sectors, as referenced with, you know, knowledge workers who are more hybrid workers. And all of those employers are looking at what can we do, what should we do for working parents and carers, because working parents are a key element of the talent population. Very often when one becomes a parent or when one becomes a carer of an adult dependent, there's a new understanding, there's a new empathy that's unlocked. There's, of course, the ability to multitask in a legendary way that's unlocked. But much more than that, it's an appreciation of the lives of service users that comes with that parent or carer, and they become valuable people that we wouldn't want to lose. So how do we ease the pathway for those individuals? And just to reference, by way of sort of the word of empathy that I've just used, we've been on the journey with yourselves, with healthcare providers, with the NHS during the last 18 months. We were really proud to be able to provide hub nurseries. A lot of our employees, we have about 8,000 people working for Bright Horizons in the UK. Many of those are also frontline workers, providing childcare in our community nursery settings. We have many workplace nurseries provided by employers, some of them NHS employers. We also have nurseries where the parents themselves are the customers who provide the childcare to their children through those nurseries. Some of them are located very near to NHS sites. And we kept open hub nurseries for key workers during that time, including our own in-house health and safety experts, developing new and enhanced hygiene and safety protocols. So we've been involved in all of that and the fast-moving requirements. We also relaunched our consumer website, Emergency Childcare, for key workers at the very start of the pandemic, to link key workers, essential workers, with the care that was available in the system. And just a couple of pictures on this slide here. All of these nurseries are near NHS sites and have many NHS families using their services. So Barrow, Bromley and North Finchley, just among the many examples around the country, had put up and carefully crafted banners and rainbows for the sort of celebration of the work that was going on amongst their parents and others in the NHS. And that fourth picture, New Southgate, provided hampers to the heroes at the nearby hospital, and also made badges with superheroes on them to celebrate the heroic work that was going on there. So it's a journey that we feel we've shared over these extraordinary times. And also when we're not in extraordinary times, we're well aware that providing childcare is an aspect of inclusion, because it enables people to participate more fully in the workforce than they might be able to do otherwise. And it's in that regard, it's particularly important from a gender point of view. Increasingly men, and particularly younger men, are wanting to be more involved in childcare and are very much pushing for flexible work and even part-time work with employers. And that eventually will get to be, we hope, an equal playing field from a gender point of view. However, currently it often falls more heavily on women to bear the childcare arrangements, and nurseries and other care provision have been an enabler in enabling women and men and people of every gender to carry on in their careers while also balancing childcare. So Paul, even outside of a pandemic, this study that we carried out, the lasting impact of childcare, shows us some stats about why this matters from an inclusion perspective, doesn't it?
Yeah, Jennifer, thank you. Yes, it does. And what we learn as an organisation is from that particular study is probably proved what we knew instinctively, which is that family-friendly organisations are just a magnet for high potential employees who are looking to build a career and family. And I was struck when we were revisiting some of these results on, there's a real correlation with what the NHS's own people plan is looking to do in terms of these items here. So in terms of returning to work, making sure that you can retain working parents who would otherwise consider job changes, excuse me, after parental leave, on retaining talent equally, so ensuring that prospective employees know they can build a career at your particular trust or organisation, whether before, during or after starting a family. And then, attracting talent. And we know, and we've got the data here that shows that if you can offer support with childcare, particularly in the form of a workplace nursery, then you are at a distinct advantage in terms of the competition with talent. And then I think finally on here, just with regards to productivity, and again it links back to prospective employees knowing that they can build a career at your organisation while managing family commitments at the same time.
Absolutely. And so let's have a little look at how it works in practice, having implemented different childcare solutions, what works for what kind of situation. This is a picture here on the screen of the on-site nursery at the Countess of Chester Hospital. But Paul, we'll talk perhaps a little bit about on-site nurseries versus near-site nurseries, and what are the relative advantages of both, turning to workplace nurseries first.
Yeah, happy to, and thanks again. So, so workplace nurseries are very much a core offering for Bright Horizons and have direct links to our mission as an organisation. Just to give it a little bit of scope and scale, so internationally we operate 400 workplace nurseries for employers, 50 of which are in the UK, many of which are on NHS sites. And employers who offer these supports, they invest in nurseries to address, as you'd imagine, employees' concerns around accessibility to and the affordability of high quality care, which is very much at the forefront of thinking for any working parent and family. And for the employer, they do this because they recognise there's a quid pro quo, right, in terms of what we just talked about, in terms of recruitment, retention, engagement, productivity, and well-being. Perhaps just in terms of where a workplace nursery is a good option, practically speaking. So if you've got 500 plus people on one site, perhaps the more the better in terms of making the nursery work from a commercial standpoint. And you've got the space available. And a good broad rule of thumb is for every capacity place that you have in a nursery, you need about 65 square foot in terms of both the classroom and the ancillary spaces. So 6,500 square foot for a nursery for 100 places. But if you have those pieces, you have the demands, you've got a lot of people, you've got a lot of working parents, and you have the space available, then adding a workplace nursery, we have lots within the NHS Trust, but many equally don't. Adding a workplace nursery can be a brilliant cultural fit for an organisation, or part of affecting some aspirational change.
Fantastic. And then the other option, if the space isn't available on site or the people are perhaps dispersed across other sites, then the other option, which is a bit of a new concept, isn't it, Paul, is to have a partnership with a local community nursery. So how does that work?
Yeah, thank you. So having a nursery partnership, so if you can't, for whatever reason, meet some of the criteria in terms of numbers, in terms of the space available, or it's just proving difficult, there is a entering into a nursery partnership agreement with Bright Horizons or any other, will enable employers to get the same benefits or very similar benefits to a workplace nursery to support employees' childcare needs. As I say, when perhaps the provision of a dedicated on-site facility can't be made to happen. So for us, we operate 300 high-quality nurseries across the UK, many close to employer workplaces, including hospital sites. So in terms of partnership, in very broad terms, the employer, instead of building something themselves, they adopt a number of spaces at an existing nursery. So forgoing the need for, perhaps capital investments in a nursery on site. And we work with employers to determine what those number of spaces might be, i.e. what's the demand looking like, which location would best suit the cohort of employees that we're talking about, and enabling them to make significant savings on the cost of care, which we know is a big barrier for people who otherwise would want to return to the workplace.
And there are tax savings, aren't there, which are perhaps particularly relevant with the pending increase in NI?
Yes, absolutely. So we talked about a nursery partnership hits the same sort of benefits as a workplace nursery in terms of improving accessibility to care and improving the affordability. So it is the workplace nursery tax exemption that we're talking about. So this is a full tax and national insurance contribution exemption for both the employer and the employee when you enter into a nursery partnership arrangement. And it helps employers who make these arrangements available, save their employers' national insurance contributions on any nursery fee that is paid for via salary sacrifice, and for employees to benefit from income tax and national insurance contribution savings that's, for a high rate taxpayer, up to 40%, 42% in fact, of the cost of their nursery fees, which is for those of folk who are joining us today who are paying nursery fees, is unfortunately a whopping amount at the moment.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you, Paul. And then backup care is another piece in the puzzle, isn't it? And I know that our colleague Artemis is on and has a case study from our friends at Chelsea and Westminster Hospitals NHS Trust, and we'll hopefully pop that into the chat, or a link where you can download that. So this is where we've partnered during the height of the pandemic. The emphasis was on the basic needs first. And I remember when Karen Adewoyan, who's the Deputy Director of People and OD at Chel West, was on another event with us, and she commented that during the pandemic, all the emphasis was on the immediate basic needs, the importance of hydration, risk assessment, PPE, how people can get to work. If the attention is on food or parking or childcare, we have to meet people where they are. And backup care is a way of finding places that are available to people when their usual arrangements don't actually come good on a given day, which was a lot of the time in the pandemic, but it's also about 8 or 10 times in an average year. So Paul, this is another model that's really relevant, isn't it?
Yes, it has been, and we've just been delighted with the feedback we've had from the Chel West guys. But very broadly, what they saw as the benefits to them offering backup care as an employer was, it just enabled staff to work when they otherwise would have had to take often short notice time off to care for dependents. And we know it's going to improve their maternity return rates, having this support in place. We've seen fantastic engagement from working parents and carers. They were very, very keen for us to be able to evidence and demonstrate. And we're seeing a really good return on investments. When we consider the cost of absenteeism versus the cost of actually providing frontline clinicians and other staff at Chel West with the opportunity to get alternative forms of care, it's a great return on investment.
Absolutely. And I think about 75% of the workforce are female, and about 35% are in the sort of 25 to 35 age range, meaning that a lot of people will have children during their time there. And of course, people of every gender have children. But particularly from a gender balance point of view, it's a real enabler, as we mentioned earlier. But equally important to say, and I know this is done at Chelwest and everywhere, it's really important when you have childcare, any support that you're providing with childcare, that you make it available to everybody very inclusively, that you promote it through different networks, including LGBT plus networks, so that it's very evident that, you know, childcare is for everybody, regardless of family structure and their role in family. And I think it can then be seen as a really inclusive step by the organisation reaching out to everybody. And there's a little example of one of the pieces of feedback received here. So it's partly about the engagement and the feel good, but it's also about the business case, isn't it, Paul, as you were saying?
Yeah, it really is. So, you know, you can see the feedback here, and we've genuinely been just so delighted with some of the feedback. It's been very emotive, very appreciative, very quick to acknowledge the link between these forms of support and the staff well-being. So, you know, people saying it's quick to book, you know, reassuring, you know, really professional care provided. And just saying generally how highly recommended the service has been. And to your point, Jennifer, on the business case, so yeah, I mean, you know, they did have to, you know, Karen had to, you know, make a very strong, robust business case. Some of the things that she shared with us is that, you know, they said many of the staff are working parents and carers, as an employer helping to reduce the stress, anxiety, and the daily juggle in combining work and family means loyal, happier, and more productive employees. For them, particularly, you know, Chelwest working in around London, you know, they recognise that childcare in the capital, particularly, enormous obstacle for working parents, and that many of the large acute trusts that they were competing with talent for had on-site nursery provision, so they committed to doing more. And they committed to reducing the impact of care-related stress and absenteeism by supporting their staff and their bank staff as well. As listening to Anton talking about that piece, so they give them 10 days of fully subsidised backup care a year, and it works really well. It's not just care in nurseries; it's nannies, it is nurseries, it's holiday clubs, it's childminders, and it's elder care agencies, so across the full gamut of care requirements.
And as you say, part of the business case is the fact that people are able to be at work. You know, the return on investment is being able to enable people to be present, to do the work they're employed for. But the other point you were just making was it is across life stages, and I think this is also really important from an inclusion point of view. Many people are caring for adult dependents, whether that's elder care or partners, other adults in their lives, older children perhaps who have particular dependency, and backup care can cater for those needs too. So it's really important again to promote that as an aspect of inclusion. Everybody has somebody generally that they are looking out for in some way. And we know, you know, Carers UK, for example, conducted research last autumn with carers, 6,000 carers, and all of those were saying that they had been heavily impacted personally by the pandemic, and they had seen those that they care for, you know, unfortunately deteriorate. We know people have lost confidence, they've lost mobility during these times. So caring for the carers within our workforces is another really important thing for employers to show awareness of and attention to. And just as we move towards the end of our presentation, just a nod to what's going on in wider sectors, which we were asked to mention. So you can see the circles on the screen there: backup care and gap cover care, you know, care that's filling the gaps in a hybrid working world. Perhaps if you have an on-site nursery, you might want other forms of care across the rest of a week for hybrid workers. We've seen many employers increasing the number of days of subsidised care. As Paul mentioned, 10 days at Chelwest. Many employers have increased that really substantially to allow people to cover their work needs in much more flexible ways with care. They've also increased, many employers, the booking window, so perhaps from a month ahead to 90 days, enabling people to cover school holidays and things like that. Again, that's showing a real investment in parents and an understanding of their lives. The second little blob there, backup care becoming virtual tutoring. At least a couple of our big investment bank clients have moved backup care from being only about having care in place so people can be present to work into being a form of support by converting some backup care sessions into virtual tutoring for young people, really responding to that educational catch-up concern that many parents, I speak personally to, are concerned about. So you know, going the extra mile in that regard. Ongoing childcare provision, as Paul has discussed, has been, you know, much more asked about by employers recently. Parental leave toolkit is a resource that we provide that's a hand-holding, step-by-step, date-driven plan across any form of parental leave for the individual taking the leave and their line manager, really guiding and coaching and mentoring both of those individuals through that transition, pre-leave, during leave, on return, to make sure that there's attention to well-being, but also to a continuing career, so that person isn't sidelined, as can so often happen. Also important from an inclusion point of view, that person is given real opportunities to return in a successful and confident way. So that's another thing, again, we've seen a lot of attention paid to recently, because parental leave has been quite an isolating and lonely time, and you know, that return phase is really important now. And networks and events, particularly around, you know, helping children with homework, but also, you know, how do you talk with children and young people about current affairs? Lots more organisations putting in place parents and family networks to discuss these topics and to share expertise. So as we conclude this, just another aspect of inclusion that we've been really glad to be part of. Ricky had mentioned at the outset the Bright Horizons Foundation for Children, our charitable arm. One of the bright spaces that we opened up recently was in the Northern Health Centre. So we create bright spaces in prisons, in refuges, in all sorts of places where families really benefit from having a brighter space, literally, for their children to be and to feel at home. And so one of these was in this Northern Health Centre, and refreshed the waiting areas there so that children could feel relaxed and engaged. So again, happy to play a part in that aspect of inclusion too. So thank you all very much for being with our presentation and listening. I'll be on the panel next, so if you have any questions, we can certainly come to those there. But thank you very much, and thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Paul and Jennifer. Fantastic presentation, and I was listening intently, and I think I'll be giving you a call offline actually to learn a little bit more about your work. And just before we to go into the panel, I'll be inviting my colleagues who have presented this morning. But I think, Jennifer, a very quick reflection from myself is this isn't just about the employee value proposition, or, you know, it's absolutely the right thing to do, but it's also part culture change as well, I think. And what you're highlighting is that kind of system cultural transformation that's required to build confidence, especially pertinent to the NHS, where 80% of our workforce, right across the national NHS, is a female workforce who we know will have greater childcare and caring responsibilities. So yes, there's that culture change required, but I think what you're presenting here is part of a more holistic care plan around our employees and our staff and our people to enable that kind of culture change to happen, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, we did a research piece with working parents during the pandemic, and one of the comments that came up there was people felt sometimes employers paid lip service. You know, we understand it's difficult for parents. We can see your kids running past the Zoom meeting. You know, people were saying, well, do what you can. But actually, sometimes for people to do what they can, because most of the working parents we know are incredibly dedicated and committed to delivering the outcomes that are needed. But you sometimes need to put something practical in place to enable that, rather than just say, do what you can. So it's about the practical piece very often.
Great stuff. And yeah, I've actually changed a nappy actually whilst I've been on a Zoom call in a meeting, and because I've moved house recently, people thought I had a water feature in my on my table, but that's no water feature. So yeah, brilliant stuff. Great, thank you, Jennifer.